Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. It is AMP DevTools, the 2019 new hotness. I did not name this myself. Gotta thank Will for that. But I did run with it. So here we go. My name is Esther Kim. I'm on the infra group here at Google. I started at Google and at AMP about a year ago now. Before that, I was at Microsoft, but this is my first contributor summit. So really excited for this. What I'm going to be talking about in this talk is what was new since last year. So you can see that me starting a year ago and all this new stuff that we have, the date kind of coincides, right? So you're welcome. I know it's called devtools, but we're going to talk about, I split it up into 4 different sections. So we'll just talk about maybe the entire life cycle from when you start developing for AMP and then how it gets released out into the wild. So first for DevTools, what's new since last year? Here are some of the things that I really like. I'll talk about the first 3 just in more detail. So if we skip to the 4th bullet point, something that Alan did that I really think is really useful is that when you create a new JavaScript file, press save, and it automatically gives you that license agreement blurb with the right year, no copying pasting needed. After, we also have a Dockerized dev environment that we support through Lando. Thanks, Weston, for that. And then if you look at our README on AMP HTML, we have project metrics there. A lot of these contributions did not come from the infra working group itself, so that's just testament to say if you think something might be useful for yourself or other people, just try it out. So let me talk about gulp. And I'm not talking about like the task management system itself, but the actual gulp command, where we made this huge change that instead of building everything and every extension that you need, you only build what you need and then lazy build the rest of the stuff. It does watching. Thank you. It watches and it serves just like it did before, and it saves you a ton of time. So let's look at what's changed here. This is the output right now for gulp. You can see that everything above the orange line is what happens before you go to localhost 8000. So the important thing to note is that it finishes after 2.8 seconds. Everything below that is when you go to an example that you're serving. And in this example, I'm running an AMP story. So I have all these extensions that I need loaded. You can see how they're compiling as you need them. So it's a lot faster. The second thing that is new as of last year is Dev Dashboard. Thanks again, Alan, for your work here. This is localhost 8000, and it looks awesome. And then I wanted to touch upon this VS Code extension. We use ESLint that almost everyone uses, and how we worked with Prettier to make sure that we have Prettier, ESLint, and AMP all working together. And it's really cool. If you have ESLint, because we have Prettier and it auto formats things for you, just make sure you have this setting set to true. It saves you a lot of time. And just wanted to do a big shout out to Prettier, who helped us change some ways of how they did formatting, because before we introduced it to AMP, it didn't work with our closure compiler. So shout out Prettier. Okay, so those are some of the dev tools. Now I'll talk about some of the test tools. Here are the 4 the basic categories that we have for test tools. 2 things that are newer are the visual-diff tests that we use with Percy and end-to-end testing. Just to show you really quick how we support different browsers, here's a quick chart of what we support. This is only with local testing, slightly different for our CI builds, but not too different. It's nice to reference, and something to point out is that I know we say we support the last 2 major versions of each browser, or 2 versions of each major browser, but we also support testing for browsers like IE11. And if you don't believe me, this is our CI build where we run integration tests for IE11 and see one test. All right, this gulp ETE is something that's brand new to me. I mean, very dear to me because I helped develop this. We use Selenium WebDriver to run end-to-end tests. It's supported locally on Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. If you run gulp end-to-end, some of the flags that you might find useful is no build, hotness, and test names if you want to see what's running. Here's like a generic output of what that looks like. It runs on minified code, so if you already done gulp this, that minifies your build for you. No build makes sure it doesn't redo it, saves you a little bit of time. And then you can see that it will repeat tests on different browsers in different environments. So standalone is your standard AMP doc environment, the viewer environment, and then also shadow. These are all on by default, but I think I have a slide with the specs. Yeah. So I just pulled this from a deep dive slide that we did earlier this year. Here are the specs that you can define in your describe place. And you have the test URL, the browsers, experiments if your component relies on the experiment flag, the different environments, and then you can also set your browser size. Okay. Finally, we've got gulp visual-diff, which runs with Puppeteer on Percy. And Percy only supports the latest version of Chrome and Firefox, so that's why we have that. And in order to get that running locally, just make sure you create your own project on Percy, get the Percy token from those project settings, and then set that to your env variables when you run gulp visual-diff. Note that I think Chrome and Firefox handle animation differently, as you know, so it's really important to use both browsers when you run these tests. And again, here's how it looks when you're running gulp visual-diff. You'll see that we are sending the test pages to Percy, but it hasn't actually finished running those tests. It only sends it, so that's why it only takes about a minute. You have to go to Percy itself to make sure your tests pass. Okay, so those are the test tools. Now let's go into the pull request tools, which to me is probably the most exciting. We've got the CI build matrix, which is new, really different from last year. And all of these different checks within your GitHub pull request that will help you get good reviews and good merges and a lot of merges in our repo. So just to retrace and maybe refresh your memory, this is what the matrix looked on Travis about 8 months ago. We have 2 jobs, and each job built, compiled the binary, ran tests both locally and on Sauce Labs, and both of them could be flaky. So it was kind of hard to make sure everything was staying productive in that way. So we changed it, and now this is what it looks like. We've got 2 stages and a lot more tests. Part of that is because we just added more test frameworks like end-to-end and visual-diff, but we also just made sure we wanted to keep your developer more productive. So let's see. Another thing that we prioritize here is that if there's a flaky test that we kind of know will flake, make sure you can restart that and only that test run so that you're not trying to restart the entire build. What else? We have build stages. So when you, if something fails in the first stage, you don't move on to the second stage, just save some compute time. And all the build artifacts are uploaded to a remote place. So you only build once, and then each of the test jobs uses those build artifacts. I know Travis is coming out with something called workspaces, where you can share build files across the different jobs in a single build, but I think that's something that's in beta right now, and we'll maybe look at it later on. And just a note, this took 34 minutes to run. The other one took 35 minutes to run, so more tests, even faster. Okay, another cool thing is the PR deploy bot. Here, I know we talked about yesterday and today different ways you can demonstrate your changes. This is a cool way because it uses the compiled build of your actual PR or your actual branch, and then it deploys it for you and gives you a static test site for you to actually put onto your PR. So if you have something like this where all your checks are passing, but you still don't have a good review or an approver, maybe you can do this and then kind of mention your reviewer to say, hey, check this out. It's super easy. Just click on this link. Something to note is that anyone can deploy your changes, not just you deploying your own. And if you haven't noticed, we also have owner's check, which is also new and actually blocking as of this week. So what is that? It's the owner's bot. It's different than the code owners feature in GitHub, but it essentially does similar things. It can notify people or working groups if they want to be notified based on what files you changed. And then if you look at the details to that check, it'll give you a breakdown of each file that you changed and who was the recommended reviewer here. It's blocking as of this week, and so if you don't have the appropriate reviews or approvals from all the code reviewers, you won't be able to merge. This is really exciting because one of the goals is to make sure that everyone that is a code owner is able to have merge access to GitHub or to our repo. And so it's even not just Googlers, but external contributors as well. You'll note that in this example, this person is actually an external contributor. Okay, so those are pull request tools. Now for release tools, there's not much to say. I'm going to just kind of recap how we do releases, but I'll talk about experimental build releases, which actually is kind of interesting. Okay, so as you know, we release on a weekly basis, just keeping it fresh. And you can see if your PR is in a release by looking at our releases page. And then we have different channels, dev and RC, that you can opt into. And then here's our cadence first. Every Tuesday, we promote last week's canary to prod. After we do that, we cut a new release candidate, promote that to dev and RC channels. And then on Wednesday, we promote that to 1%. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we just monitor. And then we just repeat that for the next week. So experimental build releases are something that are really new. And I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but for every master build on Travis, we added a new stage here called experiment. It's so that we run up to 3 experiments max that we divert some traffic to for a small portion of time. It's an entirely different experimental binary, and it's really new. So if you are interested in running your own experiment, reach out to Yutron or Erwin. And that is it. It's hot. But that's 2019. How about 2020, about this time next year? Some things that we know that are on the roadmap are renaming our stable or our releases to stable, beta, and nightly, where for nightly, we're looking at different nightly release candidates, and this is for trying to reduce the number of P0s or cherry picks. We're also looking at answering the question, is my PR in production yet? That's a release tagging bot, so when a release is pushed out, you can actually have a label on your PR or your issue that your PR closes with the release number. And then what else? It's really up to you, so just let us know. Or do it yourself. And that is it. Thanks for listening. Part of the working group for infra. Yeah, thanks again.